Hello and welcome to this this webinar on data security. I'm Venkatesh, and just to set the context, well, as we know, data is the most valuable commodity in the world today, in the digital age that we live in. Well, due to the pandemic, we've seen radical changes in the way we live and the way we work. We have moved our offices to remote locations, from the work desk to the home desk. That's where the things are as we stand today. And with that, of course, the data too has moved all across. It's moved beyond the perimeters of the office appliances, the desks, the devices that we use, and it's extremely important to keep the data very, very secure. So it's no longer just dependent on the infrastructure that you could secure your data because you're working within controlled environment. So today the burning topic rather today is how do we secure our data? And what are the various technologies which are available? And how can automation play a role in overcoming the challenges in data-centric security? So ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again, and please welcome our eminent industry professionals, the panel that we have in today. And first up is Mr. Parthasarathy, who is the Executive Vice President and also the Chief Information Security Officer at the First Abu Dhabi Bank. He has more than 29 years of experience in the industry and heads everything that's to do with the securing of the data at First Abu Dhabi Bank. Also joining us today is Yogesh Kapoor, who is the Head of Technology Transformation at the Saudi British Bank, and has lots of experience in handling various projects as far as technology transformation is concerned. So a warm welcome to him as well. And of course, talking to our panelists today is the CEO of Seclore, Vishal Gupta, who is the founder also of Seclore, the data security company. And we look forward to a very exciting conversation on the topic today. So over to you, Vishal.
Thanks, Venki, and welcome again, everyone. And thanks a lot to the other panel members for spending time on this Thursday with us between family and work and some personal pursuits. I think we are more than 24 hours of our day are committed, and for all of us here, and especially Mr. Parthasarathy and Mr. Kapoor to take out time and share their feedback with us is really valuable. Really appreciate that. I'll just take the first couple of minutes to set the context for this session, right? And if you can have the slides, please. Right. So over a period of time, enterprises have created a lot of walls and barriers, right? And the walls and barriers have focused on protecting what I call IT infrastructure elements, right? Which is networks, applications, devices, and the likes. And as the world has evolved, enterprises are coming to realize that in most cases these are all surrogate methods of protecting the real asset, which is data, right? The enterprise doesn't really care about the network or the app or the device or the application as much as it cares about the data that is resident on the device or that's traveling over the network and the likes. And what we have seen collectively happening is that as more and more of these infrastructure elements move out of the control of the enterprise, the only real way of protecting data has become to protect the data. Now, this might appear like a self-referential statement, right? How do you, to protect the data, you have to protect the data. Hardly makes any sense. But that's really the topic for today's conversation, which is how do enterprises navigate this extremely complex environment of regulatory frameworks, more and more elements of the IT infrastructure moving outside of the enterprise, and still achieve goals of security, privacy, and compliance. Right? That's the context here. I'll start with, and we can do away with the slides now. I'll start with something which as security professionals and practitioners we've all been blamed of, which is that security, privacy, and compliance have frequently been blamed as the biggest inhibitor of digital transformation. This frequently earns security professionals the title of Mr. No. Okay, you can't do this and you cannot do that, and I will not allow this, and this is too much risk, and so on, right? So we are collectively known as Mr. No in a lot of enterprises. What is your opinion of this, and how do you think we can partner better with business? And I'll start with Mr. Kapoor here. How do we not become Mr.
Hi,
No?
Vishal. Yeah, hi, Vishal, and hello to everyone. And glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me for this topic. This is the topic
Pleasure.
that I've seen over the last 20 years to evolve, right? So it started with let's do something about security to managing the expectations of stakeholders. So why do we need to do it all, right? And then it has evolved to a point where, oh my God, there's too much risk for us to deal with. So let's have the budgets and let's spend. And then the challenge is, are we getting the value for the money or not, right? So it's a great evolution that we've seen over the last 20 years, especially in everything that I have done in the cyberspace. I think where we are at the point is everybody, even at the board level, understands the importance of managing risk. The challenge for security professionals is how do we make it relevant to what are we protecting, how are we protecting, and are we getting the value for the business, which is less of data losses as possible. And I would say that with a little caveat that there's less of that dependent upon if you are very attractive in the market for the hackers to go behind you and they are one step ahead of you, you will always be one step behind, right? And if you do not move at a pace that is needed to secure yourself from rest of the rest of the population who is also at risk, then that's the challenge we always have to carry. So as an organization, what is important is what is it that we are trying to protect? Like you said, it's the data we want to protect. It's important where we know what are the crown jewels when it comes to system which hold this data, and how do we make sure that there is a language which we manage from technologist perspective, which should be transparent to businesses as to how we protect that, right? So overall, I think the responsibility that lies ahead of us, or challenge that lies ahead of us, is how do you make sure the investments is in the right place, the probability of risk is always low, and we are finding innovative solutions as we progress into this rapid change, which is exciting, but at the same time, from risk perspective, becomes more and more challenging as to how do we protect that landscape. So that's the overall context that I would say that, where the challenge is in terms of meeting the expectation of the management or the business versus the investment needed in risk management.
Have you in the last couple of years at least, have you had to, as the risk and security officer, have you had to put your foot down and say, okay, this is just too much risk, and therefore this initiative needs to either change dramatically or just be killed? And can you give us an
I think
example of that?
So there is a quality of dialogue to have, and I think it's a constant evolution of projecting what we are trying to manage, and hence why we should do something and why we should not do something. A case in point is that as a security professional, I've seen that the answer to be no at the right thing at the wrong time, right? Which is, I want to go live, but I will now not let you go live because there is no antivirus protection on the documents that we are going to receive. Okay. And that becomes a rigid response to saying that, no, this is not what we need to do. We need to find mitigation actions that could be managed, which could be used to deal with this particular situation. So I think it's a quality of dialogue to have. I'm just giving this as a small example of, in a day-to-day scenario, what you would look at. But when it comes to organization like ours, where we know the landscape is huge, but the type of problems we deal with is just any other organization. The magnitude is big, the budgets would be big. The challenge is constantly about how do you narrate a story where you want to clearly say what you definitely need as investment, what you definitely will not do as a policy, and hence how the organization needs to rally behind, knowing with trust that what is being suggested is very, very consulting, very advisory, and hence it's for the right for the organization. So we've had these challenges in terms of, not able to explain well, to also the thing about how can we ensure that what we intend to show as protection is very well understood.
Yeah, very valuable. Mr. Parthasarathy, when was the last time you said no?
See, my philosophy is never to say no. It sounds very interesting for a security professional. As he mentioned across, everything is a balance between risk and reward. I tell them that you sign the underlying risk statement, the outcomes will be owned by you. Please go ahead. The only places where I say no is when compliance authorities are given a prescriptive control and that is not being met across by the project, then the answer is straight no. Because the bank, the management, and the board put together cannot ratify a compliance violation. Whereas a risk is always a delegated authority from the board to the CEO and the CEO to the business person. So when it is a risk, then the risk is quantified and that business head underrate the risk. If it is a reputational risk, then it goes to the CEO's office and the CEO office is ready to sign off, then it's okay. After all, business is nothing but managing risk. So, and without risk, there is no return. So the question is, the person who's taking the call of taking a risk must understand what is the return for him, and then he takes a call. So my job is to say that you have an yes, subjected to you signing these risks, and also be responsible for the outcomes in case that probability becomes a reality.
Very well said. Yeah, I mean, as long as it's a continuum and it's not a yes or a no, right? As long as there is the risk is worth it, and go for it, right? Doing a surgery or not, I'm sure doctors take this call every day, right? Do you do a surgery or live without the surgery, right? I mean, that's a decision which a doctor takes
See,
probably 10 times a day.
Vishal,
Very similar to this.
Vishal, if I have to say something, to be or not to
Sure.
be is the greatest question every human being faces at every point of time. So it's okay. You can take a call, and the call can be right and the call can be wrong. That's all.
Absolutely, very well said. So let's move on to the next one, which is that enterprise IT infrastructure is slowly but surely moving outside of the control of the enterprise, right? Applications are moving to the cloud, devices are becoming more and more personal, networks are becoming home networks more often than not. Do you see security paradigms changing in this new environment? Right. Fundamentally, besides just investing in the next firewall and the next antivirus system and so on, and what, if at all, are the big changes that you see with more and more of the enterprise infrastructure leaving the enterprise in effect, Mr. Parthasarathy?
See, I would like to take COVID as a classic example, which forced the organizations to go to the cloud. Okay, so I would say nothing in the science comes with only advantage. It comes with advantage and disadvantage. It's up to the individuals how they manage the disadvantage and extract the maximum out of the advantage so that we are better placed. Now, coming back to the concept of the data moving to the cloud. So I just want to mention to say that moving to the cloud has been at least put with a comma in various economic space thanks to a data localization requirement. Data localization is a mandatory requirement in many economic spaces. And now that is prompting the cloud operators to come with in country cloud to handle that country specific data and that country specific regulation. Yes, to that extent, I agree with you that the data is going outside the physical perimeter of your office into the in country cloud of the various providers. If you look at it today, there were days when the databases were never encrypted. Now, if you, the moment you start moving the data outside the organization, I can tell you sometimes the cloud operators provide a much better security baseline as part of the standard offering when you go to them. For example, I don't know how many institutions have encryptions enabled in their premises when they're using Oracle. But you take to the Oracle cloud, it comes as a standard suite from them. So some of the standard security features are enabled when you go to the cloud. Again, as I mentioned across, every decision is having two sides, being the risk and the reward. You speak across to the business to say that this is the data, you are the owner, this is going to go from here to here. This is the cost, this is the benefit, these are the risks. Now you articulate this and take a call. Okay, you try to bring in compensatory controls like encryption, then you say access to the network of the organization, and also you ensure that the access to those cloud is restricted by the authorized devices of the institutions. So you try to build the controls to ensure that you are securing the data at the rest and the data at the moment, and increase your level of assurance. I say security is nothing but a journey where you move from the chance of survival to security of survival. So security is a journey from chance to assurance. So if you can, if you want to increase your security, you have to increase your assurance level.
Very well said. Mr. Kapoor, what new paradigms, knowing that applications are not with you, devices are not with you, networks are not with you, what do you even secure?
So I think we are not at the point of a black and white situation. We are in transition, right?
Yeah,
And I think
as we always are.
first thing, as we always are, right? And the only thing I would say is that you look at it from the organization level perspective. As soon as you've decided what you want to protect, then it's about how do you want to protect, right? And what do you want to protect? If it is in enterprise, then you need to find solutions which must be for the last so many years as to how we protect through people, policies, and technology, right? What has happened now as we are progressing into this new age of the cloud availability, it does not change the context of what I want to protect. It does not take away the context of that I need people to be behind knowing what we are protecting and what is their role in that. The policies have to still stay as to what robust policy an organization needs. The only change that is technology. So the question for the security stewards is, am I going to continue to build in-house capability, continue to bring new and new updated technology, and continue to manage in the same way, or is there an alternative? And I think what is being offered now through cloud is that alternative. But it needs to go through its own journey of, is that alternative good enough? Because again, am I going to use the cloud native data protection methods, or is it going to comply with the needs for the bank like ours, right? So these are the things that again I would think the alternative is there, alternate solution is there. The journey is going to be more interesting when you are in a hybrid position of managing the enterprise as well as moving to cloud, and that will make it more challenging, in fact, when it comes to making that transition managed. But once the cloud moves to a point where we see that not only the technology is able to offer up to date services, but it is also able to offer at a price which is much more attractive than how we would manage internally. That becomes a good stage where I would say that, okay, this is absolutely an go-to model. Cloud as such, I think, is moving in the right direction. I'm sure that it will become obvious that to manage cost ahead, this will be important. But I think it will be still a journey which will probably at least a multi-year journey ahead. And on top of that, when you bring in the DLP element to that, I think it's going to be still a journey to make you understand whether how much am I going to believe, how much am I going to accept, and how much of it is going to be acceptable not only to the organization but also the regulator. So that's just the journey I would think is about begin. But yeah, step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at Seclore, we work with some of the largest enterprises, and we see this phenomena where more, and it's a journey, like you said, Mr. Kapoor, it's a journey of more and more comfort around adopting the cloud, for example, or letting personal mobile devices to start with coming into the workplace, and of course COVID led, but home networks being the primary network of use, right? And the paradigm shifts that we are seeing is that more and more security is moving out with the infrastructure, right? So for example, if I'm moving an application to the cloud, then I expect that the cloud, the application provider will take all the measures that I was taking and a few more, because he, like, the provider is supposed to be the specialist, right? And this whole idea that even though the application is on the cloud, the responsibility of securing that application is mine, right? More and more enterprises are kind of going away from that idea. It's almost like you're renting a house and you're trying to buy homeowners insurance, right? It's not even your house. Why do you even want to insure the house that doesn't belong to you, right? Just you, all you care about are your assets which you are moving into the house, and at some point in time you might choose to move those assets out of the house, and you should only care about those assets, and the house doesn't really matter as much, right? So that that phenomena, or that method of thinking, that hey, if I'm using an application, or I'm using a network, or if I'm using personal mobile devices to come into the workplace, then the device network application provider better have security postures which meet certain minimum standards without me having to implement it, right? And I think that buying pattern change, let's say, or expectation change, is causing a lot of paradigm shifts, and it's definitely driving up the cloud service providers, or the device providers, or the network providers, to up their security game, right? They can't say, hey, I'm the dumb pipe, or I'm the dumb application, just dump all your data and I'll let you store it, and so on. They do need to start worrying about security, and finally it comes back to the realization that the only real asset is data, and every other element of the infrastructure is you're just renting stuff along the way, right? As devices come in and out, networks come in and out, applications come in and out, even people to some extent, right? So that's one repeating pattern that we've seen in our interactions with large enterprises spread globally. Yeah,
which is very well welcomed by organizations. I'm sure, Vishal, and I echo that thought, because if you do not continue to evolve, and accept what's there happening, you will not be able to get the value to the business, right? So today, cloud and its ability to provide fungible, scalable, operating expense kind of a cost model was always a given. Now that we've kind of moved in that direction, all
Yeah.
but extension of that from security perspective is only a additional bonus for sure. But again, I don't know whether we've reached a point of acceptance and assessment that what is offered is in line with minimum standards expected, let's say, from certain organizations, whether it's banking industry
Sure.
or any other. But I'm sure today what we are talking about is in the context of all industries and all scale of enterprises, whether it's small, medium, and large. And it definitely makes sense to small to medium, companies for sure, because for them to manage and maintain people, capability, technology on an ongoing basis definitely must be a challenge. So cost of risk management is absolutely critical to really managing the space of risk, and I think the cloud definitely offers that.
Yeah. Which actually leads to the next question, which is one of the most important things that is also moving outside of the enterprise is people. Right? Today, most enterprises have more non-employees working for the enterprise than employees effectively, right? There's just such a large pool of vendors and contractors and business partners and distributors and lawyers and auditors and so on. The whole value chain around the enterprise has become so rich that willy-nilly what is happening is that there's a lot of data that is going to all these external agencies, right? I'm sure as leaders in your respective very large financial services companies that you respectively work for, you must be dealing with a lot of third party risk, right? Because all of these external agencies now come with their own risks and their own risk profiles, and at some level the rule that, hey, the weakest link in the chain defines the strength of the chain. So it doesn't really matter if the hacker cannot get to the bank, and the bank is sending, let's say, data to one of its vendors, and the hacker gets into the vendor. It's equally bad, if not worse, right? Can you talk a little bit about, as people start moving out, as more and more external collaboration happens, what kind of measures are your respective enterprises taking to to manage that risk, right? Maybe I'll start with Mr. Parthasarathy.
See, to be frank with you, third party risk or the supply chain risk is one of the biggest risks which everybody is anticipating at this point of time. As you clearly mentioned, the strength of the chain is as strong as the weakest link in the chain. So if you look at the trends in the cyberspace, people tend to attack the weakest chain who are part of a trusted network. Through that, they are trying to percolate into the trusted areas. So, supply chain is a very big risk at this point of time. In fact, in many regulatory space, the supply chain risk is being looked at very, very closely by the regulators. That's point number one. Point number two, when you are having the third party working with you, uh, it brings in a huge process of risk assessing the vendor. What do you share with him? What is he sharing with you? What is the criticality of him in your operations? What level of concentration is happening directly or indirectly through that vendor? What is the value at risk for the organization in case if his systems becomes compromised or that particular system is not available. So no more the world is a small city which is living independently. Every systems are interlinked, every system works closely. So when a major supplier or a major service provider is in trouble, it's going to affect the whole industry. So coming back to the concept which we do across is people risk is second biggest risk, and you run through the various process today to ensure that there is a sufficient amount of background check is being done for any person belonging to any enterprise who's touching into your network. Okay, whether he's coming directly or indirectly, or a second party, third party, fourth party, or even the fifth party. Today, the background verification is a norm of the industry. Now, so
Mm-hmm.
coming back to the point is, the supply chain risk is a big risk. Uh, we tend to see that the data is shared, and most of the regulations. Okay, coming back to the data sharing part of it, I'll just want to quote GDPR as a reference point. Today, GDPR puts responsibility not only on the institution which collects the data, it also puts a similar responsibility on all other institutions which receive this particular data for processing. So the responsibility of the data processor and the data controller are very clearly defined. So it is
Right.
not that the person who collects the data is the only person responsible. The data processor is equally responsible for the data. So today, the countries are coming with regulations which is putting the responsibility of data not only on the collector or the originator or the person who collects the data from the data subject, but it also puts an equal responsibility on every person who processes it. So that way, the regulators are ensuring that there is a level playing ground, and the responsibility is shifted as they take the data from one party. So this is the main thing which is happening. Of course, if you see across, you have rights management tools are coming in. You use digital rights management with the expiry of data period for you to share the data. The second aspect which generally institutions use across is, you onboard the customer, onboard the vendor staff into a system, and leave the data of your organization within your organization, but accessible by that person through a container. So what happens is, data doesn't go outside the organization, it's inside your network. He does what he wants to do. Finally, he leaves the data inside the organization itself. So there is no silver bullet for this problem of third-party providers engaging in various type of services. Every institution decides on the base of classification of data. The highest level of classification is given to customer data, then staff data, then strategic data, and then finally other data. So what happens is, here the data classification is the primary mover, and the data classification and the resultant controls which are expected as per the policy will be the driver for implementing various controls across various stakeholders with whom the data is being shared.
That's very valuable. Mr. Kapoor, I mean, there are various measures, right? When an enterprise shares data with external agencies, it could rely on legal contracts, it could rely on periodic audits done, to the external agency, security, various security technologies, right? Rights management is one, of course, but there are various other, like secure email, secure FTP, those kind of things, encryption of different kinds, and so on. What kind of measures or combination of measures do you think is necessary and sufficient?
I think the starting point is you are engaging a partner for a specific purpose, whether it is skill set, capacity, but it does not mean you're relying on completely, shifting your responsibility, right? The
Mhm.
responsibility of managing risk, as expected by the regulators, as expected by the organization itself, remains a responsibility of the security stewards. And to me, all the measures that need to be taken, all the way from identifying the right partner who is able to comply with your minimum standards of security, is a starting point. And then it moves into, how do you continuously measure that it does not pose any risk in that ongoing relationship that you have with the partner, right? Now, whether we call it third party security assessment, whether it is a periodic review of that, whether it is the technologies we need to build in to protect ourselves, whether it's the processes we need to put in place. So these are answers are, all of the above. Yeah. But I think the starting point here is a very careful responsibility that you are only partnering with somebody for a specific reason, and you do not compromise your measurement, control, tracking of risk, right? So within our organization, for example, you would do all kinds of start with choosing the right partner, knowing that they are not only good from risk perspective, but from their own organization health perspective. They operate in good practice of human resource management. There is clear NDA and NDA adherence. So the policies and code of conduct that we would apply in our organization is equally applied in their organization. So these are all the measures. So the way we would operate is we would see the partner as an extension of who we are. We take that responsibility on behalf of all our customers. We take that responsibility as the organization itself. So we ensure that all our strategic partners comply to all those policies, procedures, technology standards, and ways of working. So, and I think within that is everything that you would talk about: training the people, to getting the technologies, to managing risk.
And
Our
to our
experience
audience,
here.
sorry, I'll just intervene. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
To our audience, I'd just like to say, please do keep your questions coming in. If you have any questions for our panelists, you won't find a better day to get such industry experts on board, and of course with the Vishal as well over there. So exercise your fingers, exercise your mind, and please let your questions come in. We'll be more than happy to take them on. Over to you, Vishal.
Thanks, Venki. Venki, do we have a poll coming up?
Yes, we can
Audience
put it
poll?
on whenever you're
Yep.
ready.
One, before we just do an audience poll here, our experience of how enterprises are doing or managing third-party risk is a non-linear reliance on legal contracts. I have heard so many executives say that, hey, we are covered on risk because we have a very strong legal contract with our supplier, for example. And if there is a privacy breach or a regulatory compliance or whatever, we'll effectively litigate enough that whatever is our liability, we are able to pass it on to the supplier, right? And I think that's an overwhelming response among enterprises that I've seen, in complete opposition to what you said, Mr. Kapoor, that the responsibility continues to remain with the enterprise. And what we see executives in the enterprise is, hey, we've got this covered in the non-disclosure agreement, or we've got this covered in the liability clause of the the document we signed with the contractor, and so on, right? It's a very it's almost like what is it? I think it's the ostrich, right? When trouble comes, the ostrich buries its head in the sand and say, if you can't see the trouble, there is no trouble, right? And we've seen that happen very, very often, and without getting even visibility in some sense, and definitely not control, right? So that's just our experience of it.
The fact is that the industry we are in, firstly, we have a strong regulator to please, right? And above that is a strong reputation for us to hold. So from that context, a penalty to a vendor can only be a kind of a deterrent, but it cannot solve the problem of reputation and regulatory management.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Okay, we have a quick audience poll here. Yeah. Venki, can we do a quick audience poll?
Yeah, there you go. So the first poll on your screens.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I'll just tell them. So you need to, all the attendees who are there watching online, you'll just need to scroll down, and there would be the poll visible in front of your screen. And please take your time, choose, select your response, and do respond. And you'll probably have 30 seconds, fastest finger first, so you can get it going.
Hey, what's the price for the fastest finger, Venki? And you
You
need to have a
get a
price.
secure.
Come on.
You get some secure phone. I don't know. You're the one. What is it? Probably some free advice, one-on-one consultation for data security, how to secure your data. I don't know.
Okay.
What's interesting?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Just tell us when the poll is over.
Yeah.
But
So while we're waiting, we can continue our conversation, and we'll have the
sure.
results up.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to the poll results as they kind of pour in. We'll move on in the conversation with again with decreasing control over the IT infrastructure and increasing collaboration with external agencies like partners and vendors and so on. There is also a third element, which is that regulators, privacy regulators, regulators in general are putting in more and more stringent security and compliance norms, right? And earlier they were recommendations, and now they have a lot of teeth with compliance frameworks like GDPR having revenue based fines linked to it and so on. It looks like a perfect storm for data centric security, but all cannot be that good, right? In theory, if all security could be embedded into the data itself, then you really shouldn't be caring about any infrastructure, right? You could host that data in any infrastructure, but I'm guessing all is not that good. What are the biggest challenges that you've seen with data-centric security technologies like classification, DLP, DRM, encryption, and so on? What are the biggest challenges that you've seen as you've evaluated and I'm guessing deployed a large number of these technologies, right? Mr. Kapoor?
So I think it's been a constant evolution at the speed of change versus speed of managing risk, right? So if you the current topics, we are into everything. There's digital, there's data transformation, there is cloud, there is robotics, yeah. So there is everything of everything out there, right? And when you have everything of everything and the change goes on, it's about how do you keep an eyesight of how do you protect your organization and how do you protect your data. So the rapid evolution of technologies I've seen in managing data protection also has been significant. So what you could do in terms of rule-based protection is now moving into AI-based protection, right? What we wanted to for the people to learn as to how do you classify your documents, to classify your emails, to classify your data, is probably moving into a direction that it could be used through technology capabilities. Some of it is already maturing, some of it is probably in the pipeline, but all exciting space to be in, right? But what I have seen regulators are doing, they are becoming more and more concerned and conscious, especially around the data protection, because data is become the new oil out there, right? So what you do with it, what you can do with it positively or negatively has a huge impact. So what I've seen, for example, the Bank of England announced I think about 2 years ago is about bringing in a concept of operational resilience. Now, earlier within the banking industry, you would say that operational loss management. Now we're talking about operational resilience. And operational resilience talks about you are at a point making significant change on everything in your organization in the name of digitalization, in the name of automation, in the name of data analytics to data automation. And this brings in a need to control what happens to the data, whether it is a customer data, whether it's individual data, whether it's an organization data. And from that perspective, I think the technologies are rapidly moving to improve and bring in that capability of what could be learned, machine learned, and could be managed through AI algorithms, which is bringing best way of managing few things going forward. But I think this space is going to continues to evolve. So we are currently in that transition of continue to use the rule-based technologies to and reacting and managing those kind of situations to how do we move towards AI-based technologies.
Okay. Mr. Parthasarathy, what are the biggest challenges you've seen in using data-centric security technologies?
See, okay, I'm not muted. Okay. See, the first and foremost thing is, I always tell that any control that requires to be implemented must be business aligned. So when I say a data-centric security is required, I will first ask my business, have you classified your records? Do you know what is your crown jewel? Can you classify and tell me what is the sequence of your data? And what do you aim as the crown jewel, and what is that you are ready to live with? So the first thing is in fact, many a times I feel that the technology is trying to come before the business when the business is not prepared for it, and that creates a lot of heartburns among the business people, saying that it didn't achieve for which I paid the money for. But the question is, have you first defined to say that what is that it is important to you? The question starts from there. So the first thing is, if you see across, is the business classification of the records. And the second question which comes across is, how much is the protection you require and how much is the cost you are ready to pay? Because when you say security is nothing but cost. And I tell them that, I'm giving you an assurance, and I'm not, it is an assurance. It is nothing which is, it is intangible. I'm giving you control. So the second question which comes across is to have a conversation with the business to say that, okay, these are the important assets of yours, and this is the classification, and this is the cost which is involved for protecting these assets. Because in today's world, with the COVID-19 being there, business is under tremendous pressure. At the same time, the security pressures is also high. So we have to strike a conversation with the business to say that what is the point at which the affordability of the business to risk which they cannot take comes and joins. And that is the very, very, if you ask me, the challenging conversation which you require to have to make it moving. See, once you have these two in place,
go live?
implementation is
Answer the poll. How will it go live?
Yeah. Ms. Parthasarathy, please continue here. Yeah.
Sorry, somebody was talking. That's why. So the question is, so unless otherwise you get the business buy-in for the journey which you are choosing, okay, it is not that technology alone implement the tool and make it a success. If technology is the body, I would say business is the soul. Both together makes the human live. So the involvement of business in the technological implementation is a very, very important thing, and that will drive the data-centric project implementation success.
Once you get over, let's say the body and soul are combined and they're all in sync and so on. Have you found challenges beyond that in the technology adoption, for example, or technology capability, and so on? And you, as you deploy systems like you mentioned classification, right? Now, classification could be done by people, right? So somebody who's creating a document or sending an email or whatever could classify, and that has a set of challenges associated with it, right? That you need to now educate people, make them aware, make essentially non-security people take security decisions that, even though it might be very coarse. Have you found challenges around that, or are you able to automate a large part of that data classification? to machines?
See, I tell you one thing. Data classification tools are available, but the data classification tools are like a firewall. It is the human who build the rules in the firewall, and the strength of the firewall is equal to the rules that are built in the firewall, not in the firewall by itself. So when you get the technology, you require people who understand your business, understand the technology, create a context by which the tool becomes intelligent enough to do the auto classification. So that is the greatest challenge. You require to bring in a set of people who understands. They are like interpreters. It's like a conversation between a person who knows English, another person knows Latin. Now you require a person who knows both, so that he can communicate on both the sides and ensure the communication is going on. So the challenge would be is that you require to have a technical person with the business to build those classification rules so that the classification engine can work efficiently and deliver you the business value what you are looking at. And that's a very it's a very rare combination of skills, and not only the skill, the context of the institution or the context of the industry together makes it as a different animal to be searched and found.
Our experience, again, interacting with enterprises around the world has been that that data-centric security technologies as a group, right? Whether it's classification, DLP, encryption, and I'm putting a lot of technologies in one bucket here. Our experience has been that enterprises typically face a lot of challenges with the human involvement side of these technologies, right? And even to get these technologies and feed the rules in, right, the firewall rules equivalent, is a heavy lift. And it's not a one-time project, because by the time you've configured all the rules, your business has moved on to a different spot and you're constantly chasing the new spot. And by the time you reach there, the business has moved on, and so on. And that's why we have seen that data classification, DLP, and and this whole class of technologies, which is essentially trying to make sense of the data and then do stuff with it, like put some metadata, or not let it be copied to a USB drive, or whatever. We've seen that these projects just never end, and the confidence levels around the reliability of these things, whether they're done by human beings, right? So it's one extreme could be that if you've got 10,000 people in the company, you educate these 10,000 people on how to make the right classification choices when they're sending an email, right? That's one extreme. And the other extreme is that you have a machine which magically somehow figures out exactly what is the right security level associated with this particular email that this person is sending. And we've seen that the completely manual approach, it has so much overhead of training awareness on an ongoing basis that most enterprises just never end up doing it. And the completely automated approach, where you have to configure these rules and in the specific context of your business, enterprise just never reach there at all, right? And the biggest challenge, I mean, in all of this is really, finally, it's about depending on people. Whether you're depending on an end user, Joe from accounting, or you're depending on a security administrator to really understand the business context and then be able to configure the rule and so on. Finally, you're depending on people of some sort.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and we've seen that to
Exactly,
be the
Vishal.
biggest challenge. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I
Go
think
ahead, Mr.
I
Kapoor.
tried to cover that in my previous comment, where I was saying that the constant need to build capability in-house, whether it's through technologies that you bring in or the people who need to drive those technologies, is a continuous challenge, right? And that's also then becomes an opportunity that if you could get that from a cloud kind of a service that we talked about earlier, then definitely that's the value that comes to the organization, right? Because I personally, I've seen 20 years ago when we installed the first firewall, right? It looked like, oh, something fancy has come in and it's going to protect the entire organization, because I have one internet connection. And you would find that the person who's installed that, the same guy who needs to learn about a firewall, had to go through his own journey of knowing what am I protecting and how am I protecting and how this technology works before being really saying that I got the benefit out of that technology investment, right? Of course, the world
And
has
by the
moved
time he's
on.
done that, he's been hired out by somebody, one of the other companies.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
He's become so valuable
Or
that his payroll has increased so much you can't afford him anymore.
Or the technology has changed again, and he needs to learn again. So that's been a constant evolution.
Exactly. And the way we have seen some of the technology vendors and a lot of the enterprises solve that problem is increasing amounts of automation, right? Not rule configuration, right? Which is also one form of automation, let's say, but just complete automation. And in our experience, enterprises are coming around to the realization that, look, these questions are not new. Who should have access to what pieces of data is not a particularly new question that we are asking in 2021 or 2022, right? These questions have been asked 20 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago and so on. It's the same set of questions, right? It's just the incorporation of the answers that keeps changing, right? You're incorporating these rules in the firewall and then the antivirus system and the intrusion detection and so on. And now it's these data-centric security technologies. And by automatically inheriting these rules from the firewall, from from other systems in general, from even transactional system, like your core banking system has a lot of security policies built into it, right? And what we have seen as elegant solutions is, if these data-centric security technologies could in some sense inherit all the existing security policies that you've already defined in your core banking system or your storage systems or your collaboration systems of different kind, that removes the need for manual, meaning end user or security administrator kind of interface. That's been our experience. And it's also a little bit defined by the fact that the paradigm shift here is that earlier you were trying to protect a countable number of assets, right? You had a certain set of applications,
True.
a certain set of devices, and a certain set of network elements and so on. And if you're trying to protect the data, there's an uncountable number of assets, right? You can't count the number of documents or emails that are sent out. It definitely cannot protect. And therefore automation has started playing a bigger and bigger role in achieving that goal. My next question, and I guess we are Venki, can I do a quick time check? How much time do we have?
Yeah, we are actually, the topic is so interesting, and we are already out of time, or just about there. But we do have, so whatever little time we have left, we have the poll result in, so if you want to take that in, and kudos to them. So the question actually was, what measures is your enterprise taking to ensure security, privacy, and compliance of data shared with third parties? And Vishal, it's for you to analyze.
Yeah. I mean, this is very, thanks a lot for putting together this chart in real time, Venki. And I think it matches up with at least our experience that a lot of enterprises continue to rely on legal contracts and periodic audits for collaboration or secure collaboration with the value chain. It's very it's very encouraging to see big bars against encryption, rights management, and these technologies. And I think it's a shift that will happen from the left to the right. Legal contracts will become necessary but not sufficient, and finally security of the value chain will have to be done by technology instead. Yeah. Any comments from you, Mr. Parthasarathy?
I just want to quote something to say that you said is correct. The last one is, it's not the technology, it is the business. I happen to participate in a conversation of a company which had a ransomware attack. Now the security of the company is no more a technology challenge nor a information security challenge. It is a business challenge. At the end of the day, the business owns the risk and the business drives it through for the business. The left hand is IT, The right hand is IT and the left hand is security, but the responsibility stays with the business. At the end of the day, if the system doesn't work, it is the business people and the CEO who has to face the flags with the regulators and with the customers. And in
Of
fact,
course.
not allowed to speak about the organization. The GCRO and the the CISO came and spoke across, and they said that post this incident, the security is in the KPIs of the business person. It is not in the KPI of the CISO nor the head of IT. So, I would say that
Very well
in the
said.
world of ransomware, with the world where e-commerce is driving it, in the world we don't have alternate manual way of working. It is no more, technology challenge or a security challenge. It will become a survival stroke business challenge. I hope everybody
Absolutely. Very
accepts
well
it.
said. Yeah, very well said. And it's a very interesting conversation. I can already see the halo forming behind my head, in all the enlightenment. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for your time. Here, I'll
Thank
pass it
you.
back to Venki.
Yeah, thanks. It's been wonderful. I mean, the only security that I know is, at the house where I need to ensure that all the doors and everything is locked. But but still, being from the IT field, of course, it's been a revelation. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure the audience too have enjoyed the session completely. In fact, we have questions, but we've already run out of time. But it's been an awesome session. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. Mr. Parthasarathy, Mr. Yogesh Kapoor, and of course, Vishal, so much for this lovely, enlightening session. As Vishal said, I think the halo might be coming behind me as well, albeit a very small one. But yeah, so
All right.
if we do have from the audience, do we have time just for one question? If you could take it up, if
Sure.
it is possible
Yeah.
before we
Bring
wrap
it
up.
on.
Maybe
Bring it
so
on.
there's a question that is coming from Vinitha, and she's
Okay.
in particular, she says maybe to Mr. Kapoor, but I'm sure all of you might want to pitch in on this. So her question is, from an auditing perspective, are there new popular cybersecurity challenges to deal with during audits in large transformation programs? So maybe you could start with you, Yogesh, and then probably others can also have their answers into.
That's a very interesting question, because I think normally managing risk is generally looked at from the day-to-day basis, and when we are in BAU operations. But this question is interesting from the perspective as to when you bring in change, how do you introduce right steps in ensuring that the managing of risk is also part of that delivery. So whether it is risk through the data protection, it's the risk through the third parties we are engaged on, and I think from auditing perspective, one of the things that we normally do is in any of our mega transformations is bringing in the right risk stewards within the life cycle of managing that change, so that there's a clear understanding of how do you understand the change, and how do you understand the risk associated with that change. So it's again, I'm sure the person is a qualified auditor who's kind of asked this question, but then a very interesting one. So yes, I think like I said, a change has to also look at from risk management perspective, and right steps should be taken at the right time.
Fantastic.
I
Thank you so
think
much. Sorry,
go,
please go ahead.
I'll just add one. See, my only comment over here is that as an auditor, uh, you should the only thing you should care about is data, right? There's no point in auditing other infrastructure elements and so on. And if you can audit what's happening to data, that will lead to everything else. So that's my 2 cents. But back to you, Venki.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this question, answering this question as well. And thank you once again for the lovely session. And I wish we could continue more, but then we'll be back soon with more in the series and with other topics as well. So do stay tuned, stay safe. COVID is still around us, still there. So
Please stay.
may God be with you in terms of keeping you safe, everyone. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
attending. It's bye from all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks a
much.
lot.
Thank
Thanks.
you very
Thanks
much.
Thank
to
you.
all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.